No, okay, I'm
Okay.
muting now. For me.
Okay. So yesterday we had started this Shaila. A guy has been ripped off by someone else uh, for a long time because he owns this makolet and this guy's been shoplifting from him for some time. Oh, okay, there we go. So the guy's been shoplifting from him for some time, and now he becomes a Baal Tshuva, and he has remorse, and he wants to make good. He wants to do good. So am I allowed to take the money from him? Or do I have to say to him, no, it's all right, let bygones be bygones? So on the one hand, we have the biblical directive, which is that if you steal, you have to return what you stole. However, there's also this takana that we note that was made in the times of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, um, where a person stole and he had remorse, and his wife said to him, if you return everything you stole, you're going to have to give up the whole house, including what the belt that you're wearing. It's because everything that you have is stolen. So, and it was therefore that the rabbis made a takana that hagazlanim umalve beribis shehechziru ein makablin mehem, that if people wish to make restitution for things they've stolen, including the interest that they've charged illicitly, we don't accept it from them, so that we don't prevent people from doing tshuva. And if a person does accept it, ein ruach chachamim noichehimenu, the spirit of the rabbis is not happy with him or is not within him. So it certainly indicates that you shouldn't be doing this. Now, let's learn a little bit more about this. Because of Rabbeinu Tam, shetakana zu shelo lekabel mehem, haisa rak lidoro shel Rebbe mishum hamaisa shahaya, avolo lidoros haboim. Rabbeinu Tam says that this takana was only temporary. It was only a temporary measure in the times of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi because of the specific incident that had happened where a Jew wanted to do tshuva in his generation, but it was never meant to be enacted permanently. Because after all, nowadays, says Rabbeinu Tam, and he's living in the medieval Europe, we do accept restitution from Ganovim. Aval Rabbeinu Yitzchak Cholek, the other major Tosafist, disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam. And he says, V'sover she'Rebbe tikenas hatakana hazu l'chol adoros. He said that this is a binding takana on all future generations. V'hatakana haisa lola adam shaganav olokach ribis ba'oven chad pa'ami. But that the takana is specifically for people, not if they did a one-off, a one-time act of theft or a one-time act of charging interest. Ela la'osam b'nei adam sherov ha'esek v'haparnasa shalahem me'ribis o migzela. But their main occupation is through thievery and through charging interest. In other words, you could hear such a thing. A guy makes most of his living by lending Jews money and charging them interest. And now he realizes, oh my goodness, I've been living a life of, McDonald's cheeseburgers my entire life. How can I want to rehabilitate myself. I want to become a good guy now. So how do you do tshuva for a lifetime career of ripping people off? That's who the takana was for. And therefore, that's where the rabbi said, don't accept the money from them. And if you do, the sages are unhappy with you. And apparently, that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins according to the Makor Baruch. Because if you look in the language of the Shulchan Aruch, it says as follows: Gazlan mefursam, right? That if there's a well-known Gazlan, sha'asakav bekach, that's his major, that's the way he makes his living. Everyone says Shver Tzuzayin, it's hard to be a Jew. They give me a hard time because they tell me I'm not allowed to steal. But it's hard to make a living. So some guys make a living off of thievery. What other, besides charging interest, what other people make money off of illicit activity? What if a guy owns a casino and the tables are fixed? There's plenty of Jewish professions that have existed in the past where people have been ripping people off. So Gazlan Meforsim Habol Lasos Tshuva Me'atzmo, and he decides one day he's going to do tshuva. Imein Hagazela, or let's say he owns a store and the way the scales are off, and he knows he's thrown the scales off. Imein Hagazela Kayemes Ein Mekablim Imenu. If the stolen goods are no longer intact, we don't accept his restitution. Kedei shelo yimna milasas tshuva, so that he will not desist from doing tshuva. Vimratza latzeis yidei shamayim vehechzir ein mochin biyad hanigzol milakabla. If, however, he really wants to fulfill his heavenly obligation, we do not protest the aggrieved party who is willing to accept back payment. Because of Harama, v'chenim lo bo lasus tshuva me'atzmo, rak shahanigzal tzarech letovo mechayim osa lahachzir ad kam l'shana. And the Rama adds that if there's an aggrieved party who comes forward and says, "You've been ripping me off for the last 10 years, I want restitution," we allow that restitution to take place, and we actually compel the fellow, if he's taken to a beis din, to make restitution. So this takonas hashavim is not absolute. It's just that it's almost like a recommendation or a mandate that we're telling an aggrieved party, don't press this issue. But if you do, we will obligate the ganav to pay you back. So you need, apparently, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you need 3 conditions in order to not accept payment from a ganav. Number 1, shu ganav shekol asko b'geneva v'ribis u'chadayna, that this guy's major occupation is to be a ganav. Dila echad kazeh, or like a guy who lends money with interest. Dila echad kazeh im mechayv l'achzir es kol hakesef shu lakach yimod kasher l'achzir b'tshuva. Because for such a person who wants to do tshuva, to completely do a reassessment of years and years of making money in this way, it would be very difficult for him to do tshuva. Number 2, sheba me'atzmo lahachzir es ma shelokach, that he comes forward himself and wants to do tshuva and says, I want to make restitution. And number 3, she'ein hagzela kayemes, that the stolen goods are no longer intact, right? So you need 3 of those, those 3 conditions. I've been a lifelong ganav. I want to do tshuva, and I come forward on my own, and I don't have the original items that I stole. But if the guy doesn't make his main parnasa off of this, but he had a lapse in judgment and he stole, or if the guy didn't come forward voluntarily, but he was summoned to court because of what he stole, or if the stolen goods are still intact, in all 3 cases, if you have any one of those conditions, then you are allowed to accept from the ganav. That this needs a little bit further clarification, because if we look further in that same siman in Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber writes as follows: Haroim v'hagaboyim v'hamochsim shuvasim kasha. That if you're a shepherd or you're a gabbai. Now, what does a gabbai mean? It doesn't, not the gabbai of the shul, right? But it's perhaps either, I don't know if it's the gabbai tzedakah, but it's a moches is a tax collector. So a gabbai is, I don't think it's the tzedakah person. I think it's a person who is like a tax collector, that he collects like the sheriff. right? He collects dues and things like that.
What's for non-Jewish government?
Is it for non-Jews or for Jews? Could be for the
A
Jewish
moches is works for the non-Jewish government.
government.
But I don't, the gabbai, I'm not really sure what the difference between a gabbai and a moches is here.
Maybe that is the difference.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Well, if he does his job properly, there's no reason to suspect him of stealing. You see, a roa, a shepherd, many times it's very common for a shepherd to steal because he allows the sheep to graze on other people's property without getting permission. That's why the Gemara says you should not allow shepherds of sheep to exist within Eretz Yisrael, right? They should only be outside of Eretz Yisrael because at one point, people who were shepherds were indiscriminately letting their animals graze on other people's property. But anyway, maybe we'll see from the context. Shuvas and kashem ipnei shegazlu es harabim. It's very difficult for these people to do tshuva because they repeatedly have stolen from the public. Ve'ein yodim lemiach ziru, and it's hard for them to know how they make restitution and to whom they make restitution. Lefichach yasu botzarchei rabim. And it's for that reason that if a person wants to be a Baal Tshuva after having had a career of stealing from the masses, they should commit themselves to taking care of public works. Kigon boros, shichinu ma'aros, like digging trenches and waterways for the public. In other words, you become a public servant and volunteer your services to provide basic needs for the community. And that would be the most connected way to be able to do tshuva. So he says, "V'kasha dahabisif aleph pasak maran sharoim v'chulei v'chol haganavim shiskein b'gazel rabbanon tiknu shlo yitztarchu lachzer es hagzela kedei la'akla lehem la'asos tshuva." So it almost sounds like the Mechaber is contradicting himself, because in the first sif he says that if a person is a professional ganav and spends his whole career stealing from others, the rabbis made a remedy that they don't have to return the items that they stole so that they can have an easier time doing tshuva. But then he changes his tune in Sif Beis, Pasak Maran Shehem Kain Tzrichim Lachzeres Masha Gazlu Al Yedei Shiyasu Tzarchei Rabin. And then he says, but they still have to make some level of restitution by getting involved with public works. So which one is it? Do they have to make restitution or they don't have to make restitution? V'ra'inu b'rashi hirgish bazeh v'kasav da'iri kishagzela dayin kayemes. So the Rosh tries to reconcile it and says that in Sif Beis, they have to get involved with public works when they have cash in their bank account that they know is from ill-gotten gains. They just don't know to whom the money belongs to because they've been ripping off so many different people in the community that there's no way for them to make a calculation who gets what. Ulefize asi shapir. Amnam ksas kashal marna shulchan aruch shelo kasav kain. He says, but it's a little bit hard to hear because that's not this delineated explicitly by the Mechaber. V'nafkamina gedola di'im hagzela ina kayemes hem enam chayavam lasos tzarchei rabim. The Mechaber should have actually made that note and said that if they no longer have the money, they should only then do they have to get involved with they don't have to get involved with public works. Shuvra isi bebachshik far hirgish bazevekasav dehatur umaran samchol mashakasav b'sif alef the dafka kishagzela kayemes chayv lahachzer dehu adin l'sif beis. He says, I noticed the Bach says the same thing as the Rosh, that the only time that you have to get involved with public works is if you have the money, but you don't know to whom to make restitution. Amnam ra'inu b'pischei tshuva sham shehevi shebeshut shivas tzion kasav al teretz habach shehu dachuk v'lachein kasav l'taretz ba'ofen acher. The pischei tshuva, however, brings a different answer, noting that the answer of the Bach is somewhat contrived. De la'olam de gazlan chayiv lahachzer hagzela rak de al hanigzal gazru chachavim shelo yekabel mimenu v'yimchalo kedei lahakol alav lasos tshuva. And the way that he explains it, the Sefer Shivas Tzion, is that really a Gazlan who stole, even for years, and that was his main income, still has an obligation to make restitution. The takana is not to exempt the Gazlan from making restitution, but is rather on the nigzal, on the stolen party, that he should not accept restitution from someone who's been a lifelong ganav. V'lachein, k'shehagazlan eini yodei lemigazal ve'ein hanigzal lefanenu, ein mi sheyimchol lo. And therefore, when the guy has been stealing from the public and he doesn't know who he's stolen from, there's no one here who we can say, you have to be moichel, you have to forgive the debt. And that's the reason why, when a person is stolen from so many people and he doesn't know who the aggrieved parties are, that's why he has to take action and get involved with public works. However, that too is problematic, because there's a Gemara in Bava Kama that says, Al hadin zeh she'ein mekabel mehagazlan hikshasa Gemara mimasha kasu b'braisa sheroim shegazlu meharabim yesh lahem lasu sarchei tzibor dainu livnos barushichan umaros. The Gemara gives an example of when you don't accept restitution from a ganav. And the example that's given is if a person was a shepherd for years and he was allowing the animals to graze on other people's property without their permission, they make restitution by getting involved with public works to dig trenches and waterways and so forth. So you see that even though we normally don't accept restitution from that kind of gazlan, we do still tell him to get involved with public work. So apparently it's not a contradiction. Ulefi divrei hashiva sion my kasha harei hasam irishin hagazlanim lefanenu v'zeh hanigzalim lefanenu v'zeh hagazlanim chayav medina lasus tzarchei rabin. Elavade degam bazeh him peturim elim ken hagzela kayemes uchmoshe kasav harash. He says, I don't understand why this should be these two don't match. In other words, if you're telling me that the only time that you have to get involved with public works is when you can't identify the aggrieved party, then why should the Gemara say that this is an example of people who are exempt from returning the lost items, but should instead get involved with public works? In other words, these people are not subject to the takana. And so it doesn't seem to be consistent with what the Sefer Shiva Sion is saying, that the takana applies to them, but really the takana should not apply to them because we don't know who the aggrieved parties are. Anyway, Amnam Shuv Iyanu b'makar hadvarim v'reinu b'shut Shiva Sion sham sheherich lahasbir samas umatan shalak Gemara ulefi biuros yishapir kamoshe yira hama'ayin sham amnam mirihitas hagemar v'chein mipirish Rashi sham mamash makin v'dok. Bottom line is, he says, you can reconcile the language of the Gemara, but at the end of the day, this takana of not accepting restitution from a ganav is a takana on the aggrieved party, on the party who was stolen from. It's not letting the gazlan off the hook. It's basically saying that if this guy comes to you and says, I want to return, you have an obligation to say to him, I'm moichel. I'm moichel. If a person doesn't know from whom he's stolen, and therefore he can't even offer to make restitution, that person has to get involved with public works, and he has to do something to make up for everything that he's stolen.
Public works like time, helping community service.
Yeah, community service. Like in the times of the Gemara, you would be involved with the utilities. So you'd build the sewers, and you would you'd dig ditches and anything, or build roads, anything that was needed to help the community. That was your community service. Now, because you are in a sense making restitution, because your work is in lieu of is in work of the money that you would have given to these people. So instead of giving you the $100 that I owe you, I'm building a road that you'll have benefit from, and that'll be $100 or whatever worth of service.
So that was stolen from. Is that what? That's it.
Well, let's see. We haven't finished the tshuva yet. The guy who owns the makolet. V'kosa b'sefer chasidim d'chol ze dafke im hanigzal ozeh shenosan es haribis lo chayev la'acherim kesef. He says, the Sefer Chasidim now also qualifies it. He says that if the person who was stolen from, the victim, when do we tell him he should be moichel? That's when he doesn't owe other people money. But if he's in debt and he doesn't have the wherewithal to pay his creditors, then certainly if a Goslin comes forward and offers to pay him for the things he's stolen from him, he should for sure accept it so that he can pay his creditors. In other words, I have the opportunity to make good financially with people that I owe money to. Why should I be moichel the Goslin? So there, that's another qualification. V'chein kosav hashach, and the shach says the same thing. V'hatam hu ki imhu lo yikach v'lo yishalem es hachovos shelo, and the reason is because it's like the lesser of two evils. In other words, yes, in an optimal world, you shouldn't accept the payment from a Goslin so that you can give him a chance to do tshuva. But it would be worse if you fail to pay back your debts. So if it's a question of which is the lesser of two evils, not to pay back my debts or to accept payment from a Goslin who wants to do tshuva, the lesser of those two is accept the money from a Goslin who wants to do tshuva. And therefore, since the guy who owns the makolet is in debt himself, and he needs to figure out how he's going to pay back all his debts, he may certainly accept compensation from the Goslin. Now, I thought he was going to say something else. I thought he was going to say, based on what we saw in the footnote, that this guy didn't make his whole parnasa, unless you're going to argue that he did. Maybe this guy was in a business where he was a supplier to the makolets in the community, to the local grocer, and as a supplier, he used to skim off money for himself. And he says he wants to do tshuva, so he comes to the individual makolet and he says, I've been ripping you off for years by charging you extra, saying that I was selling you 100 pounds of apples when every time I was only sending you 90 pounds of apples in your produce section. Okay? And I feel terrible because I've been doing this for years. You never caught on. But in the meantime, I've been charging you for 100 pounds of apples. And the guy then says to himself, no wonder I'm so much in debt and I haven't been able to get ahead. I've only been able to sell 90 pounds of apples, but paying for 100. So even I thought I was making a profit, when in reality, I wasn't making any profit because all my profits went to this supplier. So then certainly, in order for me to get ahead and pay back all of my debts, it's okay for me to accept compensation from this Goslin. But Rav Shraga is saying, and it doesn't even have to be directly connected. What if, despite your thievery, I've still managed to make a small profit from my makolet, but I have other debts. I have medical bills that I have to pay, right? For something completely unrelated to my business. I'm still allowed to accept the money from you because it's the lesser of two evils. Okay?
Seems a little wishy-washy. We go back and forth so many times. I guess a takana is open now. Every takana now that we're going to run it, it's open to interpretation. Is it just for then? Is it oilam? Like Rabbeinu mentions, is the kind of not married? Okay, that was only in his time. It's okay for us to have 20.
Right.
Like,
So it seems to be the consensus of the poskim is that this is a long-lasting takana. That he wanted to notify us that the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam was that it was only temporary. But that doesn't seem to be the consensus of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Ri, that it is binding on every generation, this takana, but nonetheless, there are going to be certain exceptions when you could accept it from the Ganav. First of all, if he has intact the item that he stole from you, that for sure, there's no question, you accept it back. But what's more common is that a guy has been ripping you off by stealing money or failing to provide you with goods that he owed you. So in that situation where the money's not intact, then it depends. Was this a very temporary thing and it was like a one-off, or was he doing it consistently for years? So it's only in a case where he's been doing it consistently for years that whereby you're going to bring him to financial ruin by accepting his restitution, that we say that you should not accept it back. But if the guy is insistent and he says, I want to set up a payment plan, then in certain situations, we could hear that it's okay for you to accept the money from him. Let's say you go to the Beis Din because you want to know what you should do. So the Beis Din could say to you, listen, the guy is able to do tshuva. It's not going to bring him to financial ruin because maybe the guy who's the ganaf has become very wealthy over the course of years of stealing from so many people. And he wants to do tshuva, and we want to make sure that he's not going to come to financial ruin. Here's the way to do it. We'll set up a payment plan where a third of his parnasa from here on in will go back to pay all of his creditors. There might be a way to set it up such that he maybe is not paying $1 on every dollar that he stole. Maybe they'll set up a scenario where he'll pay 50 cents on the dollar or 30 cents on the dollar. And that way, that would also be part of Takanas Hashavim. It seems that could also be something that can be reconciled. Okay?
So, Rabbi, in a situation where somebody feels like he stole all these years and he's starting to get caught on, like he's getting close to, that they're going to realize what's going on. And just before that, they sue him or goes to court, he's, I'm doing tshuva and tshuva, I'm sorry. Is he on?
He's not off. First of all, is it a one-off or he's been doing it for years?
He feels like the noose is getting tight closer and that it's going to get caught. So it's not going to get tshuva now. It's not real.
It's not really tshuva then.
Correct. It's not. But
yeah, I think that it would have to be something that can be assessed by the Beis Din to really see, like, what's the guy's real motivation? Is it because he wants to become a Baal Tshuva, or because he realizes that the boom is about to come down on him? Okay. So apparently we're getting a lot of tshuvas about guys who have stolen in the past and want to do tshuva. It's really sad right now in Israel today. There is so much theft. I was just being in Israel for 48 hours. The way people are parking their cars at night is not only an alarm system is not enough in Israel today. You have to get the club. These. I think they're more sophisticated today than the old clubs that we used to have. But they have these anti-ignition systems and all of these other things, because there's a lot of stuff that's being stolen. It's not just Israelis. I mean, it's we have to assume that it's the non-Jews that are living in Israel that are doing most of the thievery. But I guess when you think about it, the economic advantages in the Middle East are mostly in Israel today. At least in the Levant. There's more wealth in Israel than probably in all of the surrounding countries. So that's perhaps one of the reasons why there's so much theft there. But it could be that an Israeli Chiloni would get caught up in some of this stuff. Maybe he's got a chop shop or something like that, and he's been involved in the racket, and he wants to do tshuva. So it's not like so far-fetched, and all of a sudden, some Lubavitcher guy stops him on the street and asks him to put on tefillin, and he has this epiphany, or whatever. So it's not like it's so crazy. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. and continue tomorrow.